Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to the economy of the UK is in serious trouble. I've heard this a lot over the last year, and I mean, I'm going to be honest, the last thing you want to hear from a channel named Economics Explained is this, especially when it's your own country. But the whole world seems to be struggling right now. I mean, some more than others. But yeah, financially, a lot of us are going through a lot. I mean, what's it called? The cost of living crisis, that's the one. Yeah, it's a bit crazy. I mean, yeah, it's expensive to live at the moment. But in terms of the UK, I don't really follow the news. And I mean, I know before there was stuff going on in the UK. I think at the start of the year, it was really, really bad. And then it sort of got a bit better. But it's not great. I mean, when you've gone through like what was happening then when the pound was nearly under the dollar, it shows a lot of money was lost with that happening. And I mean, there's obviously a chance that it's going to happen again, and maybe it will stay under, who knows, or it'll just fall. But I don't really follow the news like that, so I don't know what's been happening. So this is what I'm going to see about this, and that is pretty much it. So we're going to check this out and learn a bit about the situation.
Is one of the largest economies in the world today. The United Kingdom is one of the largest economies in the world today, and was arguably the single country with the largest influence in bringing the world into the modern age as the forerunner of the Industrial Revolution. That makes the economic problems we are about to explore all the harder to hear, because the declining dominance of the UK economy, as well as the social, political and financial problems that are coming with it, doesn't need to happen. When an economy is going well, it's easy to keep it going well. Its currency will be strong, people will want to invest in it, it can borrow at low rates, and it should foster political stability, which means economic plans can be made over decades and generations, rather than rapid election cycles. When an economy is stagnating, or worse still shrinking, then its currency becomes less desirable, borrowing money becomes harder, people will avoid investing in it, and policy decisions will be made by whoever can make the biggest promises to voters who want a way out of the economic mess. It's easy to see what kind of situation the UK is in today. The country is not nearly as globally influential as it once was, and its economy is becoming increasingly concentrated in a few industries that don't do a lot of good for the average Brit. The economy that led the way in the Industrial Revolution and kicked off the biggest economic boom in human history is today struggling with very real problems like poverty and drastic regional inequality. The biggest problem above all, though, is that it might not matter. The actual economic situation of the UK is, if anything, underreported, and that's because the country is quickly becoming a two-speed economy, with extreme wealth concentration.
Two-speed economy. So I'm in the east of England, and that's red. Wait, let me move this. Which means it's better. Wait, that's number 3. What? Is that what it means? I think that means it's better. Gross disposable income per person. Yeah, it is. So it's the average wage is just higher here. I'm not involved in this because I'm not working for a company. I'm self-employed, so it's a bit different, but that's what we see here.
In London, and economic decline everywhere else. The two halves average out, but really the standard of living of most participants in the UK is going backwards. If policymakers feel no pressure to reverse this trend, then it will likely continue, which will be great for everybody lucky enough to be employed in the global industries of London, all at the expense of everyone else in the country. It is, if nothing else, a really interesting case study into what defines economic success in the modern day. So, why despite centuries of dominance is the UK falling behind all of a sudden? Has the growth of London come at the expense of the rest of the country? And finally, Is it going to be possible to reverse these problems now that they've taken hold?
It is crazy how a country can be so reliant on one city. And don't get me wrong, London's one of the most famous cities in the world and one of the richest cities in the world. But how one country can be so reliant on one city, it's kind of scary because something happens in this city, then you're screwed.
Managing the economy of a country and managing individual finances are very different propositions. A country can go into massive debt to fund investment into public services, and as long as they grow the economy overall, it's considered a good investment. But for individuals, you need to be thoughtful about where you put your money, and that's why we're partnering with Trading 212, an investment platform that helps you invest your money smarter and without commissions. My favourite feature is
get your money, secure the bag, promo code get up to £100. Wait, promo code EE.
£100. So check the link in the description.
I'm going to have to do that. Get a cheeky little £100. Yes, please.
Or use code EE to invest better, starting right now.
There you go.
This month alone, we've explored the economies of Italy and Greece, two other European economies that have been stagnant since the mid-2000s, and it's important to make a big disclaimer here that the UK is not in as bad a situation as these countries were.
Okay. I mean, now we aren't. Is there a potential chance? I have no idea.
Not yet, at least.
Oh, God.
But the challenges that the UK is facing are both different, and while potentially less severe, they're going to be harder to deal with. The biggest issue is simply a crisis of confidence. There is a reason that we always include something as potentially ambiguous as confidence in the exploration that we do of all national economies, and even include it in our leaderboard. And that's because it's one of the most important things that any economy can build up, and once it's lost, it can do some very tangible damage. The economy of the UK has obviously had a long, slow decline from its peak as a world-dominating colonial power, but its economic problems as they exist today arguably started on the 16th of September in 1992, now affectionately known as Black Wednesday. Before this, the UK still had its problems, but it was still seen as one of the most stable and reliable economies in the world to handle trade, finance and investment. The pound was still the world's second most used global currency, and it had the reputation for being, well, as sound as the pound. Old people might remember this saying, but it doesn't make much sense today. 2 years before this fateful day, the UK entered into an agreement known as the Exchange Rate Mechanism, or ERM. This was almost an early precursor to the euro. What this agreement did was link the major currencies in Europe together with a pre-agreed exchange rate range. If a country's exchange rate between another member country got too high or too low, the central banks of those two countries would need to intervene to get it back within the agreed upon range. This was a very expensive process, and it meant that the central banks of all of the countries involved needed to keep a lot of reserves of all of the other countries involved to make sure they could buy or sell whatever currencies they needed to keep their own currency within an agreed upon price range.
Okay.
Now, this whole thing, at least in theory, was not as stupid as it sounded. By controlling the varying exchange rates between the countries, it would make it a lot easier for businesses to trade and invest across borders without taking on exchange rate risk. If a French company invested in an Italian business and then it doubled in value, that would be great, but if the Italian lira halved in value in that time, then the French firm would be right back to where it started. The exchange rate mechanism made it so that this was theoretically not possible, which did provide a big boost to cross-border interactions between the major economies in Europe. The UK actually did not initially sign up to this scheme when it was first introduced by the European Economic Community, the forerunner to the European Union, in 1979. It took 11 years for the UK to join the agreement after political tensions within the country tossed up the benefits and risks of indirectly pegging their far more dominant global currency to the rest of Europe. 1990 was unfortunately not the ideal time to jump on board the ERM because it coincided with the collapse of the Soviet Union and the reunification of East and West Germany, which might seem completely unrelated, but let's explain.
Surely the fall of the Soviet Union would have helped, if anything, but...
The East, which was a satellite state of the USSR, was far less economically developed than the West, and the new unified Germany had to find a way to lift millions of people out of absolute poverty, modernise massively outdated industries, and build out connective infrastructure, all without destroying the existing economy in the West, which by comparison was doing really well. Now, the reason this was important...
So this is only 35 years ago, not even that. How is East Germany now? I feel like there is still a very big difference in terms of, I guess, even culture and stuff, because Berlin's in East Germany, and it's a pretty fascinating city. Well, it's actually split, but it's a really fascinating city, right? Because it's like, I don't know, I've never been there. It just looks pretty cool. And to be fair, a lot of German cities do. But is East Germany still far behind in terms of financially and stuff like that? I assume it is, but is it catching up? Is there opportunities there? How different is it living in the East to West Germany? If you've lived in it, if you lived in either or you live in either, let me know because I'd be interested. But I assume there's not many of you that would live there.
Important to the UK is because Germany decided the best way to do this would be to increase their interest rates so that foreign investors would be tempted to put money into Germany where they could make a good return, and then Germany could take some of this money and use it to make the investments it needed to get the East up to speed. This was an unconventional approach because normally when a government wants to stimulate the economy like this, they would lower interest rates instead of raising them so that businesses and individuals could borrow more money to promote economic activity through spending and business operations. The reason Germany didn't do this, though, was because they were afraid of the potential for inflation if the economic shock of absorbing the East hurt production.
Okay.
Germany in the period between the First and Second World War suffered through terrible hyperinflation, which spread poverty throughout the country, and even 60 years later, that memory had not been lost. The high interest rates in Germany did exactly what they were designed to do. They attracted investors from all over the world that wanted to keep their money as Deutschmarks because they could earn a much higher interest rate on it. This included investors from the UK who had a comparatively much lower interest rate, and since the values of these currencies were tied together with the ERM, there was theoretically no risk in having money saved in Germany. The result was that the value of the British pound wanted to go down and the Deutschmark wanted to go up. But the British Central Bank was not allowed to let that happen because of the rules of the ERM. The UK ended up having to sell huge reserves of foreign currencies to try and keep the value of the pound artificially high. And they were also forced to start raising interest rates at a time when the UK economy itself
pound was always struggling then.
Wasn't doing that well and probably would have benefited from lowering interest rates. To make matters worse, lots of investors had the suspicion that even an institution as powerful as the Bank of England couldn't hold back these market forces forever, and that eventually the value of these currencies would shoot back to where they wanted to be according to the laws of supply and demand. This meant that they changed even more of their money into German Deutschmarks because if they were right, not only would they earn a higher interest rate while they waited, they would also profit if the ERM failed and the value of currencies was allowed to equalise at the levels where they should be. Of course, this did eventually fail, but not before increasingly desperate attempts by the Bank of England to maintain their commitment to keeping the foreign exchange rate steady. On the day of the collapse, the bank raised interest rates from 10% to 15% before admitting defeat and lowering them back down to 12%. Again, all within a day.
Jeez.
The UK was hurt by this in the short term, as was the rest of Europe, but it did something far more damaging than that in the long term for the country. It started to raise doubts over just how well managed the United Kingdom really was. In the years since, the country was one of the worst hit economies by the GFC and was then collateral damage from the Eurozone crisis. It went through a very uncertain breakup with the EU, and it's now probably best known for its revolving door of prime ministers. Although, as an Australian, I really can't say too much about that last one. The problem this has created is that now nobody has much certainty about the future of the UK, which means that it's risky to make investments or trade deals or really do anything with the country, because it hasn't displayed the consistency that it was once famous for. Now, of course, it should hopefully go without saying that the UK is still far more stable than a country like Somalia, but it's all relative.
Are they the comparisons we're getting? We may be really in the mud soon. Then, I mean, Somalia is one of, like, in terms of financially, isn't that like one of the worst countries in the world? Like poverty and stuff. God damn.
The UK has become highly dependent on the financial industry above all else. This has been great for the City of London, where most of this business is conducted, but it hasn't done much good for the rest of the country. Unlike a financial centre such as New York, most of the money that flows into London isn't flowing into domestic companies and projects. Instead, it's going into opaque financial investments made all over the world on behalf of people that choose to do business in the city because of its willingness to look the other way, rather than the markets it grants access to. London is still the second largest financial centre in the world, but the type of finance being done here is in many ways doing more harm than good to the rest of the country.
Oh, wow.
The British pound has been on a slow and stable decline compared to other global currencies for basically the past century, but it's arguably still overvalued compared to where it should be because of its use by the financial industry in London. Domestic British industries have also been hurt by this because it's made it harder to compete with regional peers in the EU, who also have the advantage of more favourable trade deals now that the UK is no longer a member, as well as other emerging rivals around the world. What's more is that the UK, which was once the global leader in industrialisation, now has ageing infrastructure, declining education, and weak utilisation of technology, which is making its workers less productive, less globally competitive, and therefore less well compensated. Workers in the UK in high-skilled jobs can earn much more in places like the USA, Canada, Australia, and even Asian financial hubs like Singapore, Hong Kong, and Shanghai. This is causing a weird situation where the UK has a lot of people migrating to the country from undeveloped economies to find a better life with better opportunities, and equally a lot of people moving out of the country to find an even better life with even better opportunities. The net result of this in and out game is clear though. The UK brings in more people than it loses for...
I didn't know that was the case, to be fair. A lot of people leaving just to get better money, like better opportunities, like you said. Didn't know that was the case at all.
The net result of this in and out game is clear though. The UK brings in more people than it loses for now, but it's losing a lot of highly skilled workers, and it's been losing more and more every year since 2007. If the trend continues, the UK will end up with a declining population that's missing all of its most productive workers. This overall negative outlook has in turn made the UK an even less desirable place to make investments or start a business or begin a career. Advanced high-income countries, which again the UK still is on average, usually have one last defence against these problems, which is that their own wealthy citizens can make up for the lack of foreign investment and ease problems like national debt. Japan, for example, has the highest debt to GDP ratio in the world, but not too many economists are particularly concerned about it, because most of their debt is owed at very low interest rates to their own people. The UK also has lots of wealthy residents that can make necessary investments into the economy, but just like foreign investors, they're choosing to invest their money into other countries that have a more predictable future. The gap between foreign direct investment outflows and inflows is at its highest level ever in the UK since the GFC. Now, while all of this might seem overly theoretical, it's having very real impacts in the UK as the country struggles with regional poverty from a growing number of people that can't afford to live in their own country. Unfortunately, if these problems persist, they're likely to only feed off each other, just like in 1992, as more and more desperate attempts are made to maintain the sinking ship. Now, we've made an entire video last year on the other challenge.
Go. Fuck me. It ain't good. France and Spain have both managed to create regional centres, places you visit that feel significant and of importance: Toulouse, Bordeaux, Lyon, Bilbao, Santander. How do you say this? Santander? That's like the bank. I'm going to say Santander, Seville. Good infrastructure investment and good regional politics with local decision making seems key. Osaka used to be called the Manchester of the... I guess he means Osaka. Osaka used to be called the Manchester of the East. It's since overtaken. Osaka's current GDP per capita is around 59k versus Manchester's 37k. Now, there we go. London cannot ruin Britain. It achieved that decades, if not centuries ago. London has always behaved as if it was a separate state rather than the capital city, and the north-south divide has been an issue from before the Industrial Revolution. The government is full of platitudes about levelling up. I don't know what that is, but achieves little. Politicians generally see little benefit from levelling up. They may be supposedly the representatives of the whole country, but their every thought is influenced by the London-centric way the country's run. I mean, it definitely is based around London, that's for sure. There's definitely got to be some pros to it, right? Because I feel like without London, we would be done for. But it's because we've put ourselves in a chokehold that we're now in that point that we're so reliant on London doing so well. The problem with the UK is that it is run by billionaires for the billionaires. Most of them are not even British. I don't know about that. I'm not too sure, to be fair. But yeah, it's looking rough and it could get worse. Let's go. But yeah, this is just a little look into this. And yeah, I guess let me know your thoughts. And if you're someone who's grown up from the previous issues with the UK, what was it, Good Friday? Was it called Good Friday? Whatever it was called 30 years ago. Let me know if like back then how bad it seemed then, because obviously I'm too young to know. And then compare it to now. Is now like seeming a lot worse, or was back then seeming a lot worse? Like how does it compare? But yeah, let me know your thoughts, and until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.